everyone, this is Danielle, also known as Gently Smiling Jaws, and welcome to my Flosstube for May 2025. I'll start off, as I often do, with the tea that I have with me today. I've got my UFO mug this time, but the tea that I have in here is, and sorry for the crinkling, it's a tea from Crimson Lotus Tea. It's a Sheng Pu'er, I think from 2006, called Troublemaker. Let's see if I can get this to focus in. This is something I believe they still have available. They may even still have some in their US inventory. I'm not sure. But this tea, it has a very smoky flavor to it, and it's in the cake that it's in. Let's see, does it say the number of grams? It doesn't say on here, and I don't remember offhand the number of grams, but it's one of the square cakes that's really, really compressed, so you have to be careful when breaking it apart so you don't stab yourself with the pu'er pick. But the flavor itself is pretty smoky. If you like a peaty scotch, it's the sort of tea that you would like. And that cake, I've gone through about half of it, and I know I have another one in reserve. And I didn't bring it in here with me, but of the smoky teas that I have a clay teapot that I use just for those, because I figure better to brew all those in the same vessel, so I have my one designated just for the smoky pu'er. And with tea, I haven't really been buying tea lately, partially because of everything being up in the air as far as tariffs, because the tea that I get, although I may be purchasing it from a place located in the US, it comes from outside of the US, and so usually pu'er from Yunnan, China, so Crimson Lotus, I know, since that's one of the main places that I purchase my pu'er from, they do have a stock of tea that's here in the US, in their location here, so it's already been brought in. So if I was going to buy tea, I would be buying from their US stock until we know more about what's going on with tariffs, since that seems to change every day. And most of them, for oolong, I usually purchase that from Floating Leaves in Seattle, and so their tea comes in from Taiwan. That's where they source it from. But luckily for me, the majority of the tea that I drink, especially pu'er, is stuff that is pressed into cakes, and it's meant to hang on to it for a long time. And even though I'm not doing anything to specifically try and age it, it's fine to keep it around. So I have quite a stash, so even though I haven't really been buying tea recently, there is no lack of tea for me to drink, so I am thankful for that. Okay, to get on to the stitching portion, and I've made notes, hopefully that this video will go more smoothly. I've been in a bit of a stitching slump. As you'll see, this is the first month all year where I am behind on things, but I have also caught up on something. So we'll see. I am hopeful that this is just a temporary thing and that I can get caught up, partially because I am so close to the time of year where I get Fridays off from my job. So there's a period of a couple months where our whole office has Fridays off. We have 3-day weekends every week, and it is wonderful. When September happens, it's hard to go back to the 5 days, but we enjoy the 3-day weekends while we have them. So I'm hoping that will help propel me back into more stitching. But let me start off. So I've tried for all the rest of the year to, the first thing of the month, get my Stitch for Pride pattern stitched, and then get my Put a Bird on It stitched. The first thing I stitched on this month was Reflections of Paris by Ink Circles. I started this, I don't remember off the top of my head whether it was July or August of last year, and right now I've been feeling like I really want to get this completed and have it done. I'm planning on gifting this, and so I just kind of want to get it done and framed. It's not for any special occasion. I would just like it done and off my plate because it's not that big, even though I have a ways to go. It's something that there's really not that much left to do on it. I think the pattern is around like 7,000 stitches total. I think I'd have to look back, and so I got more done on this center area, and I think on both the red and the blue sections, because obviously since it's if you haven't seen my previous videos, this is stitched in Mose Sail silks in blue, white, and red to be like the French flag because it's Reflections of Paris. It's on a 40 count R&R Reproductions fabric. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I'm hoping to get this done because I'd like to have a finish. I'm at the point where it's starting to feel to me like I have kind of too many whips, and I would like to work on getting through some of them, or at least making some substantial progress. So even though my goal is always to do the Stitch for Pride and the Put a Bird on It first, I was sort of in a slump and not really wanting to stitch, and then when I was ready to stitch, I wanted to stitch on this, so I just gave in and let myself do it. I didn't make note of exactly how far I got on this stitch-wise, but obviously I did make some progress, so I feel like there was some accomplishment there, even if I'm behind on other things. So I would like to have this finished around the time that it's a year old. I want to have it done and get it wrapped up, so that's something I'm aiming towards, and we'll see if it happens. So that is the first whip that I stitched on. Second was something that I stitched on because somebody bugged me about it, and that is my temperature chart that is based off of my snake Bandersnatch, and I'll put a link down in the description. I have this up, so if anybody wants to stitch this, the pattern is at least for now. I just have it available to download, and so I had obviously shown this to family members and things that I was working on it. And my brother had sent me a text because I had sent him photos of it in the past and said, hey, do you have an updated picture of that temperature chart project that you're working on? Because it had come up in conversation and he was just curious to know how it had looked. And I pulled it out, and for some reason I thought I had done more of the stitching the temperatures than I had. But actually I hadn't even filled in, whoops, let's do this. I hadn't even filled in all of the January section. I had a few days left to go. So I realized I had been neglecting this. It was time to make some progress. So in the course of an evening, I sat down and caught all the way up through like mid-May. A couple notes that when stitching this, I realized that although when I was comparing the skeins to one another, the colors that I have for the 60 to 69 degrees and the 70 to 79 degrees, I thought that those were distinct enough, but once I started stitching, since there are some 70 degree days in what I've done, I realized that there was not, it wasn't showing up as a clear difference between the two colors. So if anyone is stitching this, you may want to take that into account and perhaps tweak the colors from the ones that I've chosen. But for me, I'm leaving it as is. I think it's gonna be fine. So, and the other thing is that when I started this, and I knew that this was going to be a question, and I hadn't really decided what I was going to do until I, worked on this recently. But down here when I started, I had the high temperatures, the top 3 stitches, and the low temperatures for the day as the bottom 3 stitches. And then as the snake's body moves around, I was trying to decide whether I was going to keep the high temperature on the top and the low on the bottom. But then once it, got down here, it was going to change anyway. So I just decided to have it follow the snake's body. So once it comes up here, the lows are on top and the highs are on the bottom. And when you get over here, the highs are on the left and the lows are on the right. So I'm just going to have it follow the snake's body around, which, might confuse me a little. I'm going to have to make sure I'm paying attention when I'm stitching to put the right colors in the right places. But I'm now caught up. So this is, well, at the time of filming, I am now a few days behind because I'm setting this aside, and then in a while I will pick it back up and do another chunk stuff. And the website that I'm using is, I think it's AccuWeather, just because in the past when I had looked on their site, I saw there was an easy way you could go and look back at, pull up a month that was in the past and look at the temperatures. And so that's what I did for this. So, and out of the stitching that I've done this month, at least this was some progress. So, yeah, I was glad that I pulled that out. I was thankful to my brother for the nudge to move things along. And that's where this is at. And I will say that, I don't know if I've ever done anything. I don't think I've ever done something that was temperature related, this is my first cross stitch one, but I think I had considered either doing a knit or crochet kind of temperature tracking piece, and I never ultimately did. And so this is the first time I've done it, and what I noticed, at least in this portion of stitching, is that there were so many days where either the highs or the lows were in the 40s, at least to this point in the year. So we will see how things change as we get into the warmer months. Okay. Next piece I worked on was put a bird on it. I did pull this out. I think I have less than 400 stitches in so far, and I forget what the monthly amount I should be doing is, but I think it's 1,000 something. So I'm behind, but hey, at least at the time of filming this, we're not at the end of the month yet, so I've got some time to catch up on this. And I continue to be happy with how it's coming along. Every time I pick it up, I have to be conscientious, and it happened again this month where I started to stitch and realized I had started stitching with 1 strand when I'm stitching this with 2, which is not the norm for me. Most of the projects that I am working on these days, except for some older ones that I haven't finished, are I try and use 1 strand when possible, and this is 2. As I've mentioned in past videos, I did a little test up here before I started, and I decided that for this I like the look of 2 strands better. And this is, I believe, I think this is an 18 count Aida from banana oil, and the floss is just DMC Blanc. So that is where I am at so far, and I am happy with how it is looking. And I just need to put in some time and make sure that I catch up to where I should be for the month. Let me check my notes and make sure that there isn't anything that I have forgotten to mention. I think that is it. So for the cross stitch portion, I'm pretty light on material to show for this month, just because, like I said, I'm both in a slump, had other things getting in the way, but that is where I'm at for stitching. However, oops, fix that there. Yeah, I'll leave that be. Okay, I did start my second sock. So as I had showed previously, it's been sort of a long-term thing where I had intended I wanted to learn to knit socks. And this year I finally started. Well, I think last year was when I started it. Previous video talked about the whole saga there, but ultimately I had completed a sock, and I showed this in my last video. It's big and slouchy, and it is very much a first sock. And I waited a little while because I wasn't ready to dive right into sock number 2 yet, but I have started the second sock now, and said I haven't been working on it a ton, so I'm not all that far, but what I have noticed is it's immediately apparent that sock number 2 I've had since I went through the process of sock 1. Sock number 2 is looking better, but obviously there is a significant kind of difference in size. Sock number 2 should look better overall, and you know, it's a learning process. I know that the first pair of socks is not going to be perfect by any means. So I feel like this is already showing that I've learned from this first sock, because in addition to it not being as wide as the first one was, the first when I was first doing this, and it was my first time doing anything magic loop, on the kind of sides here I was getting laddering and was having I haven't washed this or anything, and you can definitely see that when I had stitched this one, it had been that way, and you can see on each side kind of where it's not quite the same there. When I imagine some of that will go away once I wash it, but you know, I don't know how long it's going to take me to finish this, but I feel like this one should go, you know, it should be a much smoother process now that I have the practice of the first one down. And then once I finish the second sock, if I've determined after that point that I still want to go through the process of stitching another pair of socks, that's when I can get a pair. These are size 2 circular needles. The pattern that I had worked from, and I've mentioned it in my past video, and I will put the information down in the description box as well. That pattern actually called for size 1 needles, and I wasn't going to go out and buy a pair of needles when I wasn't sure if I was going to be, you know, stitching more socks beyond this attempt. So I can go out and get myself a pair of size 1 needles and some nice sock yarn if I decide after completing this pair that it is still something that I would like to pursue. But I am making myself go through the first pair before I spend additional money on anything. I've got supplies on hand, so I'm gonna use them, and then once I have a better handle on what I'm doing, then I can get materials that are more specifically geared towards that. So again, not a ton that I've done on this, and I think really this was only like a couple days of working on this, just a little bit, and then I need to pick it back up again. But that is that. Let's see. What's in here? Oh, I know that the other reason why I haven't been stitching as much is that when I stitch, I use my tablet for Pattern Keeper, and I usually bring up a YouTube video on my tablet as well. And recently, because I have been focused on keeping up with the Karen Reed trial, I have watched the vast majority of the trial so far, which means that's what takes up a lot of my evening, is kind of catching up on what happened in the trial during the day. And then sometimes there's other things I want to pay attention to also. I don't do it all the time, and I can't completely focus on it all when I do it, but I will often have, if I'm sitting at my desktop computer, I will be watching, catching up on the trial from the day, and then I may have another browser window open where I'm watching a Twitch stream or something else, and kind of sort of paying attention to both of them. I can't really do that on my tablet, and because of that, I have found myself that's been part of the reason I haven't been sitting down to stitch as much. And I know that there's it'll probably be a couple more weeks, or until get through the trial, where my focus will be a little more normal back onto what I'm doing. But this is, as I've mentioned in previous videos, this is something that I want to pay close attention to. So there's a couple days where I haven't caught up and watched everything, but I have seen the vast majority of it. In fact, the day that I'm filming this, which is the 21st, I still, after filming this, need to catch up on the rest of it, but from the portion of the trial that I heard both this morning as well as during my lunch break at work, I enjoyed the expert for the Commonwealth, who is a neurosurgeon. I know his last name is Wolf. I'm not remembering his first name off the top of head, but he was an expert witness that I liked. I felt like, from the way he spoke and presented everything, I trusted and believed the information that he was giving. But what I wanted to mention about his testimony was the part where he was asked to kind of describe his typical work day, and for part of his answer he talked about how he would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to work, get some work done, then at 6 he would come home and make his wife a cappuccino, and then at 6:30 he would be back at work. And I thought that was kind of delightful. And although this trial is a very serious thing, that was a moment that I thought was nice, and I enjoyed it. So let me do this and get back to, let's see. Okay, I have notes here on plans for my stitching. So I would like to, my hope is that I can get through Put a Bird on It, and maybe also get caught up on Stitch for Pride before the end of the month. I can't guarantee that's gonna happen. The other thing that Sharon, so my birthday is next week, during the last week of the month, and I had thought about doing a birthday start, but like I mentioned, as far as, feeling like I had enough whips going on, I don't think I want to do anything new. What I may do is pull out the Carolyn Madding birthday cake pattern, which is what I started on my birthday last year and have not done very much on since then. I may pull that back out again and try and make a little progress, but because I also want to try and get the put a bird on it and the Stitch for Pride done, I don't know whether or not that's going to happen. We'll see. One thing that I had thought about doing if I was going to do a birthday start is that as you've probably seen, there is now a website up and PDF patterns available for the primitive needle. And since I got into cross stitch, pretty recently, I was all I knew about the primitive needle is that patterns weren't really easily available anymore, and that they could be hard to find and also expensive, particularly a pattern like Blackened Sky, which a lot of people wanted, and I know stuff would go up on eBay and people would have to pay a lot of money for it. And I know there are people who know much more about kind of the backstory than I do, but my understanding is that the designer had passed away a number of years ago. Now her daughter has, worked to digitize patterns and is making them available, for purchase. And so once those patterns went up, since Blackened Sky was something that I had wanted to stitch eventually, I did go ahead and purchase, a PDF. I don't know when exactly I'm going to start it. I had thought, well, if I'm going to do a birthday start, maybe it should be that. But I think that with the number of whips and me not being super eager to add anything, plus I don't think it's something where I would really want to think about what I'm going to pick, if I'm going to do, called for colors, if the called for colors are still available, or what I have in stash. I think that's something I want to plan out more before I dive into it. So I have the pattern now. I am happy to have it and at an affordable price. But I'm not going to start in on it just yet. I need to get through more projects first. What else? As I know I had other things I wanted to mention. So let me take a sip of tea first. So one of the Patreons that I subscribe to is Jacob DeGraff, Modern Folk Embroidery. His Patreon, I think it's like $2.50 a month or something. I know he tried to keep it very affordable. And one of the things that he does, and I think he did a previous, some sort of previous Zoom thing where I had seen it, I had meant to join in and then forgot about it, but I did remember this past weekend, from the time that I'm filming, to catch one of the times that he was doing a presentation on Scottish samplers on Zoom for Patreon folks, and it was great. It was really worthwhile. I feel like I learned stuff. It was it's one of those things I thought was interesting. And so if you're looking for a Patreon at a very affordable price that offers things like that, you might want to check it out. I thought that was it's been $2.50 a month well spent. I know with some of my Patreons I have to kind of shuffle around what I am subscribe to as I for budgeting stuff, but for $2.50 that's one that I can certainly stick with. The other thing that I wanted to mention that was stitching related, although it's more embroidery than cross stitch, is a video that I watched recently, and I have mentioned before on this channel that Rajiv Surendra. I enjoy watching his videos, and he had a recent video that was about a I forget what it was titled, whether it was like the most expensive or most valuable piece of clothing that he has, but it's it's a great story, and it's about how as a child, one of the storybooks that got read was Beatrix Potter book. It was the Tailor of Gloucestershire, and how he really liked the story and the drawings, and you'll go watch the video. There is because it's a connection to that book and a whole story about how he, got this piece of clothing that's very special to him, and the threads used in it are Alverosois, and talking about how he selected colors for that. So it was a very charming video. So I will link that below and give that a watch, because it was a lot of fun. And now into books, because I had been in a reading slump, but I have gotten back into doing more reading again. I should say audiobooks, since that's what I've been focused on. And I think in my last video I mentioned that I was partially through The Less People Know About Us by Axton Betts Hamilton, and I finished that up. It was something where I pretty much knew the story going in, but I had thought it was an interesting story and wanted to go through the book, and I thought it was worthwhile, especially if you don't know the story. I think then you would find the whole thing probably more interesting than I did, because, like I said, I already knew it going in. The kind of basic gist is that growing up, Axton's family, they had to deal with all these issues related to identity theft before that was like a really, the known thing that it is today. And when she was old enough to get a credit card of her own, she realized that her own identity had been used as well, and she had to deal with like digging back out from under all the issues related to that, and trying to figure out who it was that did this. And as she went through school, she eventually sort of became an expert in identity theft, particularly related to minors. And she eventually finds out who was the person that did this to her, and it's an interesting read. So that was the first book that I had finished since my last video. Second is The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. I think that's the last Wayfarer's book that I needed to get through. I think there's also a short story that I haven't read yet, and I think I already own that on an ebook, but when I get to it, I'll probably eventually borrow the audiobook from the library and go through it. Like pretty much all of the Becky Chambers books that I've read, they aren't plot driven. They're more focused on the characters. So if you're somebody who needs, some important plot and an exciting adventure and all this, you're not going to get that from her books, but you're going to get a lot of character driven stuff that I really enjoy. And with this particular book, it's about a planet that's kind of a stopping point for a lot of travelers. And so you have these travelers that are coming in to stay at this place. I forget what exactly it's called in the book, but it's I don't know, sort of like a bed and breakfast type situation for space travelers, and you get a group of visitors there, and then there's an issue that prevents them from leaving for a bit, and so it's focused on the interaction between the characters there. And I would say that out of all of the Wayfarers books of hers that I've read, I don't know that this was my favorite one, but I enjoyed it. And with kind of the reading slump that I had been in, I knew that since I always enjoy her books, it was time to go through this one because I needed to get myself back in the swing of going through audiobooks. So got through that one. Next up, sort of continuing in the same vein of something where I was pretty sure I was going to like it, and it wasn't going to be, it was just going to be something with kind of a cozier, happier feel, like a lot of the like the Becky Chambers books. I got the second book in the Vera Wong series. It was Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping on a Dead Man by Jesse Q. Sutanto. And I had mentioned when I went through the first book, I mentioned it in one of my videos. And so this book is very much in the same vein as the first book. I would say it's sort of like you had a template from the first book. You have the second book, you kind of plug in different characters and somewhat different, situations, and it's sort of more of the same. So it wasn't anything like super surprising or anything like that, but I like the characters. Some of the subject matter ended up a little darker than I sort of expected, but overall it's sort of a funny, lighthearted story. And the kind of premise is you have Vera Wong. She's an older Chinese woman who has a tea house, which she says is Vera Wang's tea house, because she figures people know the designer and that will draw more people into her shop, even though she is Vera Wong. And she in the first book sort of finds herself in a situation where she is solving a murder, and so now she is wanting to do this again because something that she has found very enjoyable and has brought more people into her life, when in the first book she's someone who is very lonely and then sort of ends up with a community through the whole process of solving this murder. So the best book ever? No, but I knew from how I had liked the first book that I figured I would like the second. And again, for where I was at with my reading, I knew that's what I wanted, and it fit the bill for what I needed. Next book, tea break here, is taking a turn from that. It was something that I had seen. I was watching some booktuber YouTube video at some point a while back, and this book had been recommended, and so I had put it on my hold list, and it popped up, and I think it was in like the 5-hour range for the audiobook, and I'm like, sure, let's go ahead and do this. The book is called Wave, A Memoir of Life After the Tsunami by Sonali Dharani Yangala. And it's about the December 26, 2004 tsunami. And the sort of story here is that Sonali is Sri Lankan. She lived in the, she had, in her life, she had gone to study in the UK, met her husband, had a family. They lived in London, but would often travel to Sri Lanka to visit with her family there. So they were in Sri Lanka at the time that the tsunami hit. And in that tsunami, her husband, her 2 children, and her parents all died. And that is just, that's an enormous amount of loss. And so the book starts off kind of describing the events of that day, and then the rest of the book is sort of about her coping with the loss, as well as kind of talking about her life with her family, and like, like how she met her husband, and what their life had been like there. And it was just I think it's not a fun book, but it's a look at sort of the grief of somebody who has gone through a lot. And kind of the one part in that book that stuck out most to me was a section talking about her parents' house. So after this all happens, and she spends a lot of time in Sri Lanka and everything, and obviously has this unbelievable amount of grief. She's not in a state to sort of be handling affairs with what she's had going on. But her parents' house, her brother, I forget where her brother lives, but he decides that it's kind of in their best interest to rent out their parents' house, because she's not really in a state to be doing anything with it or managing it, and he's not there with it. So this is what he decides the plan is. And her losing access to that house because there are tenants there, it hits her hard. And her behavior towards the folks that are living there is not great. And she doesn't, in this book, when she's talking about what actions she takes and everything, it's not making any excuses for the things that she does. It's just describing, this is what I did because of the state of mind that I was in. So yeah, she is basically harassing the tenants that are there, and obviously that is not a good thing to do. She realizes that that's not a good thing to do. Her brother doesn't understand sort of why it bothers her as much as it does. But I just thought that whole section, it was just sort of a look at how grief can affect somebody, because everybody goes through grief. But I think this, with the number of people that she lost all at once, it's like for myself, I talked about, I had I lost my father to cancer, which was very sad, and but because of how I lost my dad, there was plenty of time for me to know this is what's going to happen, and to sort of mentally prepare myself, even though obviously there was still plenty of grief involved. Having that time to prepare versus people being gone in an instant, I think the experience is going to be very different. And so I just I appreciated reading the book. Again, it's not a fun book, so depending on your mood and where you're at, I'm not necessarily recommending it, but I thought it was very interesting to go through. The next book, which I have just started, I'm only like a half hour into it, and I don't know if I don't remember how many hours the audiobook is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. It's a book that I have heard about before, but I know very little about it, and I've tried to keep it that way. My understanding is it's there's a couple, um, one partner, and I can't remember the names of the two gals, but one of them has gone on part of this mission, like some kind of deep sea exploration, and it was only supposed to be for this certain amount of time, but something happens that keeps her down there way longer. And when she comes back home to her wife, um, the wife who has been at home is looking at her partner and the behavior and is like, something isn't right here. That's the extent of what I know from this book. So I'm waiting to see how it plays out. And again, I've heard of this book from multiple people. I can't remember where I first heard it from. I think I was watching is it Eclectic Possessions? I'm blanking on her name, but I was watching one of her if it was a Flosstube or vlog, and she had mentioned the book, and I'm like, well, I'm hearing about it again, and I had just recently finished Wave, so I happened to look on Libby and saw that the audiobook for this was available, so I just went ahead and borrowed it. And like I said, I'm barely any amount into it, but that's what I'm going through right now. And I think the last thing that I want to mention, and I guess one of the other things that kept me from diving full force into cross stitch recently, although I don't really want to say that it didn't really keep me from doing it. This was something I was meaning to do, and I finally did some focus on it, is that I have tried to spend some time writing letters, and I need to do more to send to my local like representatives and folks. But I sat down and spent, I think I forget how many, if it was maybe like 14, 15, I've just been writing letters, and I'll link to the information. I had seen someone on Instagram, blanking on the name, put it in the description, mentioning things about sending letters on a regular basis to the White House. Not necessarily that it's something where it's going to get read and it's going to make a difference. No, it's more about sending stuff in that has to be dealt with, and sort of making it a problem, making it something that has to be dealt with, and letting the folks there know that you're unhappy with how things are going on, even though I expect no direct result because of this. But yeah, I have a whole stack of 14 or 15 when I sat down one weekend, did a bunch, and I have been putting one a week in the mail, so now I have a bit of a cushion before I sit down and write some more. And then I also need to focus on getting stuff to my local representatives as well. And I feel like taking the time to write something and sending in a physical letter gets more attention when more people are doing email or things like that, because obviously in some ways it's easier, but I feel like sending in something physical is more, here's something you have to pay attention to. It's a physical object, not just an email that can get shoved into a separate folder and filed away. So again, only made a little dent so far, but I'm trying to keep myself doing something. And I should say for plans, the other thing that I need to get back to, as I've mentioned before, is I need to get my the Palestine pattern that I'm working on to continue on that, because obviously that whole situation is just getting worse and worse again, and it's so frustrating to me that that so little is being done. And yeah, I'm just, I will link down in the description, as I try to mention in all my videos, that where you can go to donate eSIMs to folks that are there to help with the communication. Although obviously the main issue right now is aid not getting through, and I just, yeah, that's a whole thing. So I think that's all that I have for this video. I'm not sure where I am time wise. I think we're under an hour here, and I still need to edit this video and hopefully get it ready to upload Sunday during Memorial Day weekend, as I've been trying to get my videos up the last Sunday of the month. So fingers crossed I can continue along with that. But thank you for watching, particularly if you watch through to the end of the video, and I will be back next month with hopefully more stitching, and hopefully more relaxed with my 3-day weekends, and we'll see. But again, thank you, and I will see you in June. Bye.